Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to have a conversation and spend some time just updating where we are and where things are as a district and where we're going. So I appreciate you being here this evening. As always, there's an agenda. We're going to talk about Cowboys and pit crews, and I'll explain why in a minute. We'll talk about what was next. Again, I always want to recap where we were because I see some new faces that are here tonight, and I just want to let you know what we have accomplished over the past few meetings. Talk a little bit about public requests of information, records. To make sure that we're all on the same page on the process of that. That has come up a couple times. Provide some updates and then good news, and then all the questions you want to ask. Fair? Fair. All right. Let's continue. So doctors, years ago, they were like the masters of all trades, right? You think when you went to the doctor knew how to do everything from a Band-Aid to put on a splint to everything, right? We also realized that medicine, like anything else, became more and more complicated. Right? There's more diseases, there's more challenges. Everyone comes with a different set of issues that need additional attention. And a doctor couldn't do it all, or can't do it all. Back in the day, they would have been seen more as cowboys, right? When you think about a cowboy, that's a person that lassos everything. Look at this cowboy in particular, he probably has everything from dinner to a ride home, right? So when you think about it, a cowboy kind of did everything, but things have since changed. And again, we're not talking about, wow. There we go. We're not talking about these cowboys. Right? We're talking about a different set of cowboys. We wouldn't want to talk about these cowboys anyway because we really would want to talk about this team here. I don't want to throw that in any chance I get. Any chance I get, you know, we're still Super Bowl champs for at least 200 more days. And not to mention that our Sixers got a higher team. Anyway, I went too far. I understand. But nonetheless, back to Cowboys. Back to Cowboys. Cowboys again back in the day. That was the way we did things, right? We were one person, only one person could do almost everything, or at least attempt to do everything. The times have since changed for many, many reasons. The complexity of it, what a doctor does, what a cowboy would do today, and what we do as educators is much more complicated than allowing or being able for one person to do the job of an educator. And therefore, the idea is to think now, like doctors are, and us, we're like putting our hands up and saying, what do we need to do differently to fix the challenges that are ahead of us? And the idea is we need to shift away from the idea of a cowboy and think more like a pit crew. If you think about what a pit crew does, they are a team of people that are addressing an issue, and they all have a very specific role to address that one issue. There's no one person that is tasked with everything. Because it's just nearly impossible. So we think about the complexity of what we're asked to do as educators, as leaders. There's so many pieces to it. So the idea is that we need to move as a community away from the idea that there's a cowboy, but now there's a pit crew. There's a pit crew of people working to get this solution. Similar to this pit crew, which happens to be our regional champion basketball team, who went off. Yes, please give them a round of applause. Sitting in the stands, and I was actually by Mr. Hill, my 4-year-old son, who loves all sports, was watching this team, and he went upstairs a little bit later. He said he said, Daddy, they came together for some reason. And I was like, why didn't they have the ball? Was his question. Why don't they have the ball when they're in this huddle? And I said, this is the time where they come together to figure out how they're going to get the ball into the hoop, right? And our job is as a pit crew, collective pit crew, to figure out how we're going to get our ball in the hoop for our kids. All right. So again, congratulations to this wonderful group of young men, coaches, family members, and everyone that was there to support them along the way, because that was a monumental feat. And we as a district, as a community, also have a monumental feat to accomplish as well, in the academic side of things for our youth. So with that said, let's continue with transparency as a family. So can I be honest?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are things. There's a lot of things that go on, right? When we think about the complexity of the work that we have, there's a lot of information that is passed to and from individuals, and this is the forum in which I want to bring that information to you. This is the best time to ask questions back and forth, on top of all the other meetings that go on. However, we also want to honor and have continued to focus on providing an avenue to answer questions. I want to step out of the presentation just momentarily so that for folks that are new to us in this meeting, can see, like if you go to the Lorraine Promise page, the first thing that pops up is the Lorraine Promise page. You click on more, you can't see what I see. I really thought I had this fixed this time. I will not try that again. But anyway, if you go to the Lorraine Promise page, I promise that it is on there, and it will outline for you every public information request that we receive. Everyone that we receive, we move as fast as we can to address them. However, we get a lot of them. For example, take a guess how many public records requests this is. This is one.
Oh, wow.
This is one public records request that was given to us, which we fulfill by law. But you can see it takes not only time to produce this, but it takes a lot of time for people to go through it. And on top of that, I have a great lawyer, very expensive one, that has to go through each and every one of these pages. So you can imagine one public records request is easily $1,000 to $2,000 of taxpayer money. So I point this out to you is that this is our forum, this is our chance to talk, and I want us to be able to talk through things versus going through public records if possible. Obviously, if public records are the way to go, we will fulfill them, but no, it does take time. And I really just want to admit to you that we're trying to do our best job as possible to answer them all, but it will take time. So I appreciate your patience, but I wanted to give you a physical example of what it looks like. Okay? So we're going to continue talking as a family. Okay? With that said, three things I will always promise you. You've seen this slide. If you've been to every town hall, you've seen this slide probably more times than many, and probably could rehearse what is on here. Three things I always promise you. I will get information to you as fast as I can, but as slow as I must, because I want to make sure it's accurate. For example, this public information request is going to take some time to sit through. It's over 10,000 emails we have to sit through to make sure we get the right information to those that are requesting this record. Two, we will post all of the information as accurate as possible on our website. Again, if you go to lorrainepromise.org, you click on the Lorraine Promise page where it says more, it'll give you everything you could ever imagine on that page. And if you don't have it, please let us know. Please send us an email and say, hey, I need, or I don't see, and we will guide you to that information. And then lastly, feedback is a gift. And what's been really, really helpful to see from so many people, that the amount of feedback is increasing. So I get more and more emails around, hey, where's this? I have some ideas about that. It feels really good. I would say in August I might have gotten one. This past week I can say I got about 10. So it feels good that that trust is starting to be built and people feel comfortable with sharing feedback on things that could be better. So I really appreciate it. And you'll see an example of some of your feedback that just came in that I want to share back to you as well. Okay? So those are the three things I will always promise to you. What was next? Again, recapping what we've covered or what we've been accomplishing. You'll notice if you were here about 3 months ago, there was a lot more red and yellow on this page. It's all green, which means that we've completed it. So we've been mobilizing the CBS, our Community Business School Partnership team, to move on some initiatives, which you'll see and hear about a little bit later. We get great input from our district union leadership, and I feel like we have a great working relationship to push towards the goals that are necessary in Lorraine Promise. Input from our school leaders, teachers, and scholars, to the point where scholars have been pretty candid lately on some issues that have come up over the past few days, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. But again, I appreciate all the ideas and thoughts that come from everyone. We're finalizing our personnel shifts, and I think there's some people in here that are exhausted from interviewing, and some people that we're interviewing are like, please don't interview me anymore. But nonetheless, we're almost there. And then our budget process. We put out a budget at our last we spoke about the budget at our last town hall, and then the ADC meeting. So 2 meetings, we had some time talking about where our budget is. So we're finalizing that piece, and now we're moving to internal departmental budgets to figure out how those work, and then communicating that final budget. As I mentioned, we've already done that as well. Too fast. Assembling our chief team. So our chief team is here. It's exciting. Last time, I think we had everyone but Dr. LaKimber Brown. If you don't mind standing, Dr. LaKimber Brown, just so they can see your face. So the last piece of our puzzle to push on many of the things we need to get done, which is very, very nice. With the addition of some other positions that could arise, but nonetheless, this is the team that we're moving forward to push on our goals. Identifying our deans of academics and our dean of scholar and family engagement. It's yellow because we're in the middle of interviewing and finalizing that pool. but otherwise, we're in pretty good shape. So I'm going to go through some district leader updates, give you some context of those school leadership updates, talk about our task force teams and where we've gone, what we've accomplished, and where we're moving, and then talk about that next phase now, right? So I've been here about 9 months, I believe. I've seen 2 seasons, winter and 70 degrees. And we'll talk about what that looks like hopefully in the spring with 70 degrees. And then talk about the safety task force, which has come up in light of what happened over in our country over the past 4 or 5 months, and I want to speak to that a little bit. And then how will all this work kind of come together? So you can anticipate hearing about those pieces. Okay? So, when we think about leadership, it takes some time for us to get together to create the pathway that we want to see, but it takes all of us that have our own leadership strengths within us to guide us to where we need to go. And so as the district leadership team, we are in the phase of finalizing some very key positions. Obviously, as I mentioned, our chief team has now arrived. We are here. This slide is actually no different than last month because those 3 positions are still the same. They could be potential additions, except for the one where as Director of Early Childhood Education, we did find and identify someone who will be our Director of Early Childhood Education, which is huge for many reasons. We all know the importance of early childhood education. We won't have grade 12 graders unless they start as grade 4-year-olds, right? And so the support that we need and direction we need is important that, identify that position. And the good news about that position is being funded and supported by a foundation. So it's not coming out of our And then lastly, a Director of Culture and Climate, which again hasn't been identified, but again I listed as a potential position, just in case that question comes up later. All right. School leader updates. So this is the process. This was the process up until the last time I spoke with you. Nothing has changed on this slide. The piece that is changing is the fact that, and I can't for whatever reason, this last piece, we did not meet that date for a few reasons. One, we stepped back and realized the interview process for a turnaround principal took priority and took more time. And we wanted to make sure that was right first. We didn't want to move to those that are supporting the leadership team, so we made sure our turnaround principals were identified and in place. Second, our turnaround principals are the ones that will be selecting their dean. So it's very important that we identify the turnaround principals first. So we had to push back that date. So I apologize that we didn't hit the mark on this date, but you'll see an updated and revised calendar based on where we are. To get to that point though, we did 3 things. To get to the point where we have turnaround principals identified, or at least our finalists identified, we are reviewing the community feedback. So April 7th, we had a community meet and greet where there's a number of community members that came out. We're reviewing their feedback. We're now in the process of figuring out how to connect to those finalists that were selected now to be the turnaround principal of select schools. That takes a little bit of time. Scheduling, timing, making sure we hear back from them and say they really want to do it. I forget the football coach who said he was going to take the job and then he went to or didn't even go to the press conference and quit just recently. We don't want that to happen. So we're avoiding that scenario. So before we move on and name that team and give names of individuals at individual schools, we want to make sure we have confirmation of who those leaders will be at each one of those schools. So then that leadership team process, the selection of the leadership team, will then commence from there. But let's talk about the feedback from the community for a second. What I've learned in 9 months about this community more than anything else, there is a community that has a very clear understanding of what they want to see in their district. I can't say that about every community across this country. There's communities that are very broken, there are communities that aren't rallied around the right things, but it's comforting to see this community rallied around the care of their kids, the care of their future. And it's amazing to see how many people really are committed to that in a city where there is such great pride. So I thank you as the broader community of being that village for our kids. And that village came out on April 7th. There were over 150 community members that came out on a Saturday morning. Some loved coming that early. Some people looked at me like I had 4 eyes. But they were there. They were there. They were there because they wanted to see who was going to be the leaders of their schools, who was going to be leading the charge in our city's transformation within our education system. 122 of them were community panelists. So each school had a panel of 5, 6, 7 individuals for each of the schools, and it was wonderful to see 122 of them there. And then we had 22 finalist candidates for our school buildings. So the process was this, and it landed at this number. 5 external candidates have been given or have been selected as a turnaround principal, and are in the process of getting an offer. Those names, obviously, we're just throwing them out their offer until we hear back from them. We'll confirm who they are. There's 5 individuals that were selected externally and 8 internal candidates. I received a ton of concern around, will it be all outsiders? The rumor was at one point, I was bringing, and I kid you not, I don't know how they were going to get here, to be honest. There were going to be 300 Teach for America teachers coming all into Lorain at the same time. And I said, wow. And I tried to rationalize how that was going to happen, and I couldn't. But nonetheless, that was what was out there. So I think this is a powerful number and balance, right? There are a number of people that are here in Lorain that we said, you know what, they should be the turnaround principals of our district. And then there's 5 external that will add to the mix to give us that combination necessary to move forward, right? What's even more powerful is, I thought this was a great number. I thought this was really a good, healthy balance. I thought this was more important. The panelists were also very concerned about the people that were being presented to them weren't going to be picked, meaning they didn't feel as if their voice was going to be heard. I can promise you that the PDFs, where's Barb here? Barb sent me the PDFs of each and every individual school's 15-page feedback survey, and I have looked at every last page to the point where I might even be able to quote some of the people that it was anonymous, but quote who said that, because knowing who they are. But nonetheless, each of their voices, each of your voices was heard. And for that, 10 out of the 13 panels, there were the panel's first choice, who they put as their first choice for turnaround principal was selected, which I think is powerful. And out of the first and second choice, 12 out of 13. And the only reason why it wasn't 13 out of 13, because the 13th person was selected as a higher choice for another school. So I thought that was a powerful number to recognize the importance of the community and the importance of your voice. So again, I thank you for lending your voice to the conversation on who should be a turnaround principal. As far as feedback goes, there were 2 things. One, grow. The idea of having the principal that was at that school interview on their panel. And there's a few reasons why certain principals did not interview at their home school. And I've been pretty consistent in this message around why. One is I look at data constantly. If that school wasn't moving under that leadership, however they did well in the interview, I still wanted them to interview because they could be a better fit at a different school. But if the numbers didn't match, I couldn't keep them at that same school. It wouldn't be fair unless we did something different. However, I wanted to make sure they were given the opportunity to interview. The glow, though, on the other side, which came from, I would say, a healthy 60% of the feedback surveys, is that people actually appreciated the opportunity to be a part of a community meet and greet with candidates. I don't know if you all can tell me better if there has been an opportunity for the community to inform principal candidates.
No.
I don't know, but nonetheless, I think there was folks that appreciated this.
Never, ever.
So here's the updated the schedule based on the revisions that had to be made. Turnaround principals will receive dean candidate resumes. So after we again get confirmations from our turnaround principals, we can then release the names of those individuals. And at that point, they will also receive all of the dean candidate resumes. So they have a chance to look through, see who they want to talk to further, so on and so forth. And then those principals will select some questions, identify how they want to ask and interview the individual deans, and then we'll try to do somewhat of a matching process for principals and deans. Reason being, if you can imagine, I'm a turnaround principal. I have 18 resumes for Dean of Scholar and Family Engagement, 18 resumes for academic outcomes. That's a lot of resumes, and you probably don't want to sit and talk to 36 people in a day. So the hope is that your turnaround principal will be able to identify 3 to 5 individuals that they want to talk to more extensively. Deans will try to match their skill set so they can sit down and actually have conversations. And then at that point, principals will have an opportunity to say, you know what, of the 3 to 5 people I've seen, I want this person, and I want, for Dean of Scholar Family Engagement and for academic outcomes, and then finalize the process, all by May 4th. Okay? So we'll finally have school leadership. So next, actually, let me pause for questions. Are there any questions on that piece? So that was a lot of information before I go to the committees. It's a lot of information.
When do you anticipate announcing who the turnaround principals actually are?
Yep, so that date, so prior to April 18th. So once we get confirmation from those individuals who said, yes, I want to be a turnaround principal, then we'll release those names. The hope is that we'll release them all at the same time.
Could you explain the stack of papers again and the purpose that you have there? That's
Sure.
costing us, the taxpayers, what did you say, approximately $2,000?
Yeah.
And that's just one?
This is one. Yeah, this is one public records request. Keep it one second.
And that public records request is from the Board of Education?
This one in particular, yes. Most, I want to say, are, yes.
And that's not it, you can't put that on some kind of technology that we had? I thought you said that it was there, and
Yeah.
all you had to do was look it up?
Yep, it's all on the Lorain School's TLP page, if you go there.
So what is the purpose then of giving us a paper copy? Is that what you're doing? You're giving us a paper copy, and we have, the board has provided our own iPads so we can look it up.
Yes, ma'am.
Amen. So then you're spending $2,000, that's one request?
Yes, ma'am.
And there may be 2 or 3 dozen of those?
Yes.
And so you're gonna spend our money that way, when they can look it up on an iPad?
So by law,
Yeah.
I have to produce it. However, we don't necessarily, correct me on this, we don't necessarily have to produce it by paper. However, I think
we have to fill it how it is requested, basically, due to access or whatnot. There has been situations where, yeah, we have pointed in the direction of the website. I've supplied it in flash drives, I've supplied it in discs, CD, with information, vertical disc. I've supplied it in many different ways. It just depends on kind of that person's access and what they have the ability to view it as, or how they request it, really.
So we're attempting to make sure that anyone can get it any way they need it. Yes.
According to the Sunshine Law, that's how, what they request, that's what you have to give, because I looked it up.
Yeah.
But I did look up on the website, your website that you were talking about, and I did see, and I forgot to bring it, all the requests that these people, whoever didn't have names there, they asked for, and I thought it was ridiculous. They asked for telephone number, telephone, emails, I mean, it was a whole lot. So I believe what you said, because I saw it on the website, and it's a whole lot of it.
Well, I'm very concerned about this because you're saying that's about $2,000. So if they do 20 or 30 of this, we're talking about $40,000, $50,000.
Potentially.
That can bring us a teacher
Potentially. Yeah.
instead of all that paper.
Paper, and it goes behind the papers too. There's a lawyer that has to sift through all of them. So that's really the bigger cost.
And we could have read that on our own iPad that the Board of Education supplied every board member. And they put on the information that we want.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct. That's correct. Absolutely. Or I think this is also the forum for questions. So like if there are some bigger questions, this will be the space, right? And so I mean, by you being here, for example, probably you're not making this request because you're here to get.
No, because I come and get my own information so that you don't spend that.
I agree. Any other questions? Any other questions about this part of the process? Jay, did I answer your question?
Yeah, by the 18th, okay.
Again, about ideas. So going back to ideas. The next phase of this is to talk about the ideas that we're pushing forward. I'm going to do a small recap for some that are new today, but more importantly, let you know where we are with the ideas that we're pushing forward. So in short, you probably have seen these before. These are the 5 commitments within the Lorraine Promise. These are the 5 we're pushing on over the next 5 years. And each of these commitments have individual strategies. There's 3 strategies under each one. And we realized that we couldn't do all 15 of them, so we decided we're going to do 5. We're going to address 5 of them as we go forward, 1 for each of the commitments. With each one of those commitments, we've identified and reached out to our teachers, and way back when, I think it was January, February, we gave out a survey to teachers, and we had an overwhelming amount of teachers that we thought respond to the survey, which was great. And of those that responded, there were about 111, 112 teachers that said, I actually want to be a part of that task force as well. So those individuals helped form the task force to figure out the direction of those initiatives. And we've been identifying partners and building project plans, and then we're in the phase of now moving to piloting some of these initiatives, and I will speak a little bit about that now. So again, these are the big 5 initiatives broken up by 3 components. So if you go across horizontally, the Birth to Bachelor's initiative has 3 parts. It has Parent U, Class Link, and the dashboard, and I can finally show you the dashboard. If you have been with me for I don't know how many months, you have seen that we have not been able to show the dashboard. It's going to work. So the dashboard that is being built, again, to go and aid more transparency, is here. No, here. It's still being built, so there's. Oh, is that why you were laughing at me? Is that why? Oh, yeah. Okay. It's really here this time. Can we get a camera shot of this? It's really here. We're going to get this to work one day. But nonetheless, the dashboard outlines a lot of the pieces that we've been talking about and want to show in a transparent way around how our performance and what we're doing. Right? So at one point, once the dashboard actually is being able to be seen, you will see it. It will also be on the website. So you as a community member will have some access to those numbers. Now granted, we cannot give student level numbers because they're laws to protect each one of our kids, but we can give you numbers in the aggregate on how we're performing. That would be access to you, but also accountability for us. So you're going to see numbers, you're going to say, Hardy, why is chronic absenteeism still X% across the district? And we want to actually tell you it's really low and get to a point where it's really low, but we know we have work to do to get there. But we don't want to hide those numbers from you. We want to show you them and make sure that we're doing something about it. So that's the dashboard piece. But nonetheless, there's 3 parts to each of the initiatives. That's all right. Oh, there's the dashboard. Please have your autograph. So as I was mentioning, for each of the 5 commitments within the Lorraine Promise, there is a tab for data for each one of these pieces. It's, as I mentioned, it's still being built. However, each, as you can see on the left-hand side, are those 5 components. And we're still working on numbers and how those numbers, kind of pan out and how they would look, but also putting things in bands and ranges. So right now, those numbers aren't very exciting or very good. We understand that. But the first step was to get a dashboard where you can see how we're doing. So you have no questions on academically, behaviorally, how things are going. I won't go through in great detail all of the individual pieces in here. Some of it's still being built. But you will also be able to go by, this is the district profile, so if you want to look by school, you can see it by school. If you want to eventually drill down for those that are in our school system, principals, teachers, so on and so forth, you will be able to click on it and get all the way down to individual staff. Okay? So the hope is that this will force us to be, 1, really transparent on where we are in between state assessment cycles, but 2, it will force us to have conversations around outcomes for kids, which is the most important. Any questions about this? I'm just excited to get this up. Thank you so much. I owe you like 7 hugs at least. Yeah. Any questions about it? After all that, no questions? Give me one, just make me feel better.
Get it on the website?
Yes, it'll be on the lorainepromise.org/TLP page once it's finalized. You saw there were some areas that we are still filling in. I did not put up a draft, but I wanted to show you that it is being built. So the same page with Lorraine Promise.
Not there yet.
Not there yet. Not there yet. Still. Other questions? I'll take the one. But nonetheless, each one of those columns actually align to a partner or a part of our pit crew, if you will, to go back to the analogy. There's a part that's led by the district exclusively with teachers, leaders, parents, and others. I'm sorry, teachers, leaders, and district leaders. There's a community-led piece, which if you come to our community business school meetings, you will see these components happening or conversations around these components happening at our CBS meetings. And then there's a school-led piece. Now, the school-led piece hasn't kicked off too far, right? Because we're not in the phase to implement anything new. The last thing I would want to do to schools right now, and to go back to the promise to teachers at the beginning of the year, we are not touching instruction in your classrooms this year. Do what you do. We're going to work to build this right so we can implement it the right way. So those components on the right-hand side may not even be on your radar, and that's completely okay, because we're still in the phases of figuring out all of those pieces. With that said, some of these pieces obviously are attached, all these pieces are attached to the Lorraine Promise, but these pieces across the board may even connect to each other. So you will see some blend, and should see some blend between district-led, community-led, and school-led projects. There is a group of individuals, 3 individuals are senior project managers, or in this case, manager, I think this is one manager, supporting each of these initiatives to some degree. There's the light orange line there. So they are actually the keeper, the glue, to keep these pieces together for one initiative. So you can imagine they're at the table and helping facilitate conversations at the district level. They're at the table facilitating conversations at the community level, and they'll be at the table with the school-led project as well to make sure it all comes together. At the end of the day, it will connect to the Lorraine Promise, and ultimately there are cabinet leaders, our chiefs, who ultimately oversee the outcomes. And those are the individuals that are held accountable for those pieces. So this is the ecosystem, if you will, of each initiative and the connection of all of those pieces. Okay, so let's go granular. In theory, that's a lot. Well, let's actually see what it looks like. So I want to pull out commitment 3, strategy 1, which is around closing the opportunity gap. The initiative, in this case, is called Opportunity for All, and it has 3 components: positive school culture, the 3 C's, and culture relevant pedagogy and understanding our bias. So professional learning that's coming, which isn't here yet. The piece that we've really focused a lot on in this short amount of time is thinking about those 3 C's, and also thinking about what is our school culture? What does it look like? So with that said, there is a district team on the left-hand side who is working with teachers, so you see your face in that picture. You were at a task force meeting at one point for Commitment 3, and you were looking at, so how do we pull together a series of field lessons or field experiences for our kids, a cultural event, a career, and a college trip every single year for our kids. So that's the big goal of this. What does that look like? And then you have community partners who are saying on that Opportunities for All, how do we build out positive school culture through creating mentorship with our young people and making sure they feel good about school every single day? And lastly, at schools, how do we bring that all together with strong professional learning? Those are like the 3 tenets of it. So if you take those 3 tenets and drill down even further, you will know that the 3 C's in the middle, actually it should be the other way around, it should be district, but the 3 C's, the actual events that we're trying to do, have been collaborated on by these individuals, and I think a few of them are here today. So if you're here, here's your hand, if you are here. Can we give them a round of applause? I thank you, right? When you think about the work that goes in, it's nice to see so many names up there trying to figure out how to get our kids to excellent experiences. And this is the team that's doing it, led by Rachel and Elena, who have been doing a great job facilitating those conversations. So again, drilling down to what's going on every single day against those task forces. And a result of this, as we're looking at where we're going, they've been able to create that initial draft of the dashboard of field lessons for every kid across the district from pre-K to 12 against our academy, our high school academies. So the goal is for our kids to get to 3 of those trips every single year. The beauty of this, which I just think is awesome that has come together through this team, is the idea that I'm a kindergarten scholar who's going to see this in K, and it's going to continue through 12th grade, and I'm going to have some kind of experience around the arts or around science or whatever it might be. And I won't go to the same trip every single year, which was also a concern. Every year I want to go to the zoo. That's great. It's nice to see the animals, right? But how else do I build my understanding of science? So the intent of this, and again, draft form. So this is very, very rough, and I'm sure it has to go back to that committee to look at some more before it's approved. Gives you an idea of the work that's coming out of this. The next step for this is, and actually is in the hand of the potential funders to say, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Please fund this, so that we can make sure that all of these experiences happen. If it isn't funded, we're going to find money to make it happen, because I think it's essential that our kids get opportunity. I don't think we can move forward without our kids seeing things that they need to understand and experience as young people. Yes, ma'am.
You're saying give the kids opportunities. What about the parents?
Yes, so great question. Now, I was using this as an example. just because this was the one I think we've gotten the most traction in so far. But if you look at the top there, Parent View is under the Birth to Bachelor's initiative. That's where the opportunities for parents come in. So we're building out a way for our parents to not only be engaged, but get the experiences and understanding and information they need to be successful. Yes, ma'am.
But beginning of the school year, okay, they have a open house.
Yes.
Okay, the parents are not told, okay, or a letter sent out stating that they have to be fingerprinted in order to assist in the schools, okay? They're not being told that. I'm just now finding out, okay, that field trip, that I had to be fingerprinted. Okay, now I'm getting, after the field trip yesterday, I'm being told by my granddaughter's teacher that is telling Skylar that the next field trip that's coming up is the end of this month, okay? But she told my granddaughter this time that I don't have to be fingerprinted. Okay, so we're getting mixed conflicts here, and things are being said to my granddaughter, like each and every day, something different, okay, because she's upset with me.
Right.
You know.
I got you. So I think there's two things. I heard two things. I want to make sure I heard both of the things.
How do we get these parents to know about what they do? Because there's a lot of parents out there that would love to volunteer, but don't have any idea, and they get stumped at the last minute.
Right. So I think there's two things. One, that information, that communication. Two, consistency along the way.
Notifications.
And notification. So the beautiful thing about this, our chief of schools has finally arrived, and she's hearing all of this right now. So this will be something that will be addressed. And obviously, this is the beauty of feedback. Honestly, this is like I would have never have known that. And if you wouldn't have come tonight, I would have never have known that. And so now we can do something about it. Now, will it be fixed Friday on this next?
No.
But it is something.
Right away.
Right, but it is something
But it
now.
should be by next school year.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that.
May I just interject to that, because I've been volunteering for years, and I don't know whether things have changed. I not only was fingerprinted, background check, never had a speeding ticket or anything like that, but they did that. I have my ID. I can't go into any building, but I can go into the building that I was assigned to, but I don't have to keep doing that. So why
We
are
have to do that every year.
why they have changed?
I have to be fingerprinted every year.
Can I say this? Well, let me say this. I think, again, this feedback is helpful. One, because this process of going through and creating new initiatives has also prompted us into having those senior project manager roles. And our senior project managers are also, some of them are here right now hearing this. We're creating a way so that we have to figure out this method, and it came up in a meeting literally this week around like a help desk type ticket. So where there's this type of concern, you can feed into our projects and say, hey, there's a big issue on how volunteerism happens within the district, or the consistency of communication, or whatever it might be. When we get that feedback, we can then do something about it, and our senior project manager will be the driver. That's why.
I mean, I don't have a problem being fingerprinted.
Right, I understand.
You know,
It's just you don't get
that's
that
a safety
information.
issue, and I understand that.
I understand.
The point of it is we're not being notified ahead of time and then right at the last minute, what are you gonna do?
I got it. I understand. I understand.
That's how it goes.
I got it. And there is a ton of people listening to make sure that we get it done. The next piece of that too, once we get to, and I wish I could show you the maybe we can show them we can show you the Lorraine Promise page, because maybe it is then being able to add like that space where you can say, hey, I have this concern or challenge or whatever it might be. Actually, there's an email address too at the end that I'll show you, but you can see how we're addressing what you bring up. That's the next step.
Okay, let me ask you another question. How do you get to the actual teacher that you have the issue with, okay? But I mean, because my granddaughter's in special ed class, okay?
Okay.
Has special ed.
Yes, ma'am.
But she also has a regular teacher too. I'm getting thrown back, the issues I have is with the regular teacher. I'm getting thrown back to the special ed teacher and getting answers, and that's not who I want to talk to. I want to talk to the other. How do I get to that? And then I finally get a phone call,
Sure.
okay? And the phone call is, the first one to come out and teach us about this. I didn't say that.
So I think two things. One of the steps you took was today, because I saw you in the office today, and I know Dr. Sturgill is all over.
He's working on that,
Yeah.
but I went to a meeting to see you at the Lorain High, okay, to get answers because I was getting pushed
I
away
understand.
from everything.
And that's why
And I
Dr. Sturgill.
understand Dr. Sturgill is a very good guy. I mean, I went and my dad was had him for a principal. He's very good at what he does.
Right.
But you told me at the school
Correct.
that you gave me a card to call me directly.
Correct.
And all I get is pushed away. I'm
Well-
just now getting to Dr. Sturgill.
Right, so when things get in, like information like that comes to me, I want to make sure I assign the right person to address it, right? It goes back to that pit crew at the beginning, right? I wish I could handle all of those individual situations, but Dr.
understand.
Sturgill is tremendous,
He's
and
good.
and he's going to take care of it. I promise. I promise you so much. I will never wear a Michigan shirt around you.
Just like, the Lorain City
Oh, I can't
Schools
wear that either.
in Charleston know me personally.
Oh, I understand. And now I know you. I'm going to move us on a little
Okay,
bit.
go ahead.
With that said, again, these are the three components of that initiative. I was speaking to you again, and thank you again, those task force members that were a part of this. I think it was important to have all of these wonderful voices to get to where we are. And this is where we are right now. And I think, I mean, that was within 2 meetings, 3 meetings, something like that with that group. So like 2 meetings. I think that's really tremendous. That's really powerful. So the next step is, for this group, isn't necessarily piloting. It would be nice for all of our kids to go on these trips and figure it out in the next month, but it's actually figure out how we can fund it, how we make it real, so teachers know this is legitimate. Not something that we're dreaming to have happen, but actually happen. Here are the next set of dates for the task force meeting, so you are aware. If you haven't been a part of it, or you want to be a part of it in some form or fashion. For example, the Initiative 1, if you're interested in that parent university piece, it is going to be April 17th. Initiative 2, which is continuing around our earliest scholars, talking about pre-K and instruction for our earliest kids, it's on the 26th. Initiative 3, which I just was demonstrating or showing you, will be on April 19th. And the instructional vision and looking at standard-based grading will happen on April 23rd. And last but not least, in the media center, we're talking about high school design and all those on the 26th. Okay, those are the upcoming dates. Yes, ma'am. This PowerPoint will be under the Town Hall PowerPoint presentation section, which we may be able to show. So remaining critical decisions. So there's still some things that are out there that we need to get done. There's a lot of work to get done before our teachers leave. Again, the dashboard, as you saw, it's in formation. We're almost there. Finalizing school and staffing and leadership transitions. And I want to pause on that one for a second, because there have been concerns around what is happening to our school leaders, what happens next, what is the trickle-down effect. So obviously I showed you the list of the 5 external and 8 internal candidates. We'll make sure 13. I'm missing one, right? I'm missing high school. We still have high school interviews for our leadership team there occurring. So that is a larger, different process that we still need to take care of, but that's underway. Given that information, some of our school leaders that were school leaders who may not be a school leader next year, they may have tenure in a position as a teacher. They were presented that understanding, and they were given the opportunity, if they wanted to, either apply for a dean position or then also move back to the classroom. And then when that happens, it creates a trickle-down effect. Both Jay and I are going to have some conversations in the near future around how those things will pan out. But it does have the impact of how school staffing will kind of finalize for this upcoming year. The hope is that we get this done as soon as we can, but understanding there's some processes and bargaining agreements we have to abide by to ensure that we're doing the right thing by our people, and most importantly, and that takes time. It just takes time. Our instructional approach, which the next 3 really talk about us now turning the tide towards thinking about instruction. This first year was not about instruction. I was pretty clear in August that this first year was not going to be about instruction. One, I wanted the teachers to continue to do the great things they do for kids. And for me to come in and tell you to do, you're doing this curriculum, now go and do this one would not have been fair. So those things were untouched intentionally. The second reason, when you come into a new situation, you have to kind of understand the leadership, the people that are leading the charge first, and you have to get that team right. So the majority of this year was focused on that, but next year is all focused and pushing our focus on instruction. both the school culture side and the academic side. That's what I included in the structure for next year. So we have to plan. We have to do a ton of planning to get to that space, including spending a significant amount of time with our school leaders next year, who will be school leaders next year in this school year. So we can get them a chance to prime and prep and get ready, because it will be a big transformation on how we think about leadership and how we focus on instruction. And then begin to plan and come together on our professional collaboration days. If you've seen the 18-19 calendar, also on the website, you will see there's a shift in the days at the beginning of the year. They're called professional collaboration days because we want teachers to collaborate and create lesson plans and work together in preparing for the school year. Again, not sitting in front of a PowerPoint and listening to a PowerPoint and just sitting there. Engaging in planning, engaging in getting better at instruction, understanding their personal bias, all of those pieces that we know are important to being a great facilitator of learning, very different than what we've done in the past, hence the name change. So if you saw that on the calendar, this is why. All right? Last recommendations, and I promise I'll be quiet very quickly. Continue to provide information publicly as fast as we can and as accurate as we can, obviously, but we'll have to go at the pace that we can actually get this done. Departmental budgeting is happening, so we want to get to schools and let them know what is coming as far as budgeting comes around. Approved school staffing, again, we're in the middle of thinking through how that should roll out, given some of the changes we've made at the leadership level. And then we have to, as we do this, we're seeing some discrepancies in our former HR practices and how things were done and how people were hired, and all those things need to be investigated and looked at more deeply. So we're considering looking at the at a higher level, and then move forward with our partnerships. So there, if you go to the Lorraine Promise page, do you mind if you can get there? Because I'm referring it many times, and I don't know if I can actually just show folks what we're doing. But on the Lorraine Promise page, you will see potential partners we're going to look to work with for each of those initiatives. And you can click on their proposals, so you can see actually what's included with them. And then ultimately, finding a way, if we can't obviously work it through our budget, we'll find a way to get it through.
I have a question. What about bullying? Because every day my daughter comes home and she sits there and tells me certain kids in the class are bullying her, but the teachers aren't doing anything about it. The principals aren't doing anything about it. You need to come up with some kind of solution in the school system to stop this from occurring.
Yeah. So thank you for raising that, because I almost missed it. So one of the big things that came up, I want to say, around the Parkland shooting situation, when we were, unfortunately, another shooting at one of our schools, it prompted us to think about what are we doing to make sure that we are safe. There was a, right, and so right after that, there was a letter that came out to the community around what we understood and what we needed to do, asking for a task force to be formed. We received some emails from parents who wanted to be on this task force to address safety of our kids. And what our parents, we have actually 2 parents, we have a board member, we have, I'm blanking on names, we have 2 police officers, and of course our chief family officer, and I'm blanking on 1 or 2 other names. But there's about 7 or 8 people that are on this task force to this point who are going to look at what does it mean to be safe. And when we think of safety, it's not just whether or not, wherever you land in the belief of having bulletproof windows to guns, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but it's more about how do we create safety for young people so they feel psychologically safe when they come into our building. They don't feel like they're being bullied. They feel like they want to come to school every single day. That's what that task force is going to be tasked to do and be able to do, including how do we help our teachers and leaders create that environment. So the hope is this spring, that task force that's coming together will create those recommendations so we can put that in place for next year.
She came home and she told me that a boy in her class punched her in the stomach today.
No, field trip, and the teacher didn't do anything.
Okay. So why don't we do this? I'm going to connect you with the chief family officer who happens to be here so we can have this conversation. And I don't think Dr. Sturgill is not here.
No.
But nonetheless, we can connect after this. But let me just navigate through this and then we can. All right. So as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, when you go to the website, you go to the Lorraine Promise page, this is all the information that we have. We've added a ton of tabs. We'll continue to add tabs until it probably gets too long. But nonetheless, all the information I was referencing is here. Makes me a little nervous to click on it because every time I click on something, it doesn't show up. But for example, if you want to look at the public information responses, which we have to change to public records, I believe, But nonetheless, if you click here, yes, you will then see the questions that have been asked of us, and then all of our responses to those questions. Numbers, answers, all there, right? The challenge is, and I apologize, especially, and here's all the documents that we mentioned in there, like if you're looking for documents, records, they're all there as well. The challenge is, and I apologize, as more public records requests come in, it might get a little longer, but nonetheless it'll be there. We'll try to make it more intuitive for you to access at some point as well.
Could you
The other piece that I
could you read perhaps what that public record request was?
it was a bunch of them. It was like 20 of them. Yeah, somewhere like a small team. Okay. For the potential new partners and initiatives, this was what I was referring to as we're trying to attach a partner to an initiative. Here are all of the proposals that come in, and then we started to, and this goes back to internet safety and things that we were just talking about. We were looking for partners to help us with that. If you click on some of these links, you'll actually see their proposals, so you know what we're trying to do and all the information on who these potential partners are. But nonetheless, this information is all on the website in case you ever need to access it. And I will flash up the timeline and then close out. Maybe? Okay, cool. Again, this timeline hasn't changed. We are in the middle now of reviewing our district-wide pilots of those commitments and task force that I was showing you. We're in the phase of now piloting some of those pieces and seeing things how they are panning out. And then by May 10th, still is the plan to give teachers, leaders, all the initial draft of the full implementation of what is coming, so you know what is coming. Will it shift a little bit after May 10th? Absolutely, because we have to make adjustments after we get feedback. But by May 10th, the promise is still to show you, instructionally, here's the things you can anticipate. From a school culture lens, here are the things you can anticipate. The initiatives, here are the things you can anticipate, giving you that high level information so you have it. Going back again to August when people said, we find out things the day before we come back, I refuse to allow you to have things the day before you come back. I need you to have it way earlier. So you can tell us if this is right, answer questions you may have, and not have to go without those answers. And it only happens if we give you enough time to review the information. Fair? Awesome. Okay. Lastly, I'd like to close on good news and some actual next steps. So yesterday? Wow. Like 2 weeks ago. But yesterday, we were invited to the National Civil Rights Summit in downtown Cleveland at the City Club. And we, meaning our scholars. Our scholars were asked to participate, and they were actually ambassadors. This is our group of scholars right here. And first, I'll be very, very honest, I was nervous. So, because for those that have been to the City Club, has a lot of history, a lot of prestige. The people that have walked through there and have stood on that stage, from past presidents to very influential individuals, and then the people that sit at those tables and the amount of wealth that they bring with them when they sit down, right? It's pretty tremendous. And I was worried or just nervous about our kids kind of being put in and understanding the surroundings that they were in. I came late because I had a meeting, and I come in a little bit late, and you would have thought they were actually running the whole thing. Wow. They were tremendous. They were everywhere. They knew where everything was. I walked in, they were like, sorry, here's your name tag. I was like, oh, this is amazing. To the point where the gentleman who was on stage there, Avery Friedman, who, if you've seen or he came over to our table. He's the one that invited us. He came over to our table and said, you are the best group of scholars that we have seen in a long time here. To me. So I said, Mr. Freeman, can you come over and talk to our kids about that? He was as we were walking over, and he did. And he spoke to them, and I said 2 of them actually want to become lawyers. He had 2 business cards and handed one to each, and you would have thought, and it felt like $1 million to them, right? Because now they have a contact with a lawyer, someone they can actually contact and learn about what it means to be a true lawyer. So I end on that because I think that was a big day for our kids. Something we should be proud of for our kids and the wonderful things that they do. So with that said, I will stop. Wow, 55 minutes. I'm ready for questions. Yeah. Yes.
When last we talked, your plan next year is to eliminate 34 teaching positions and then replace, using that money, add at least what we can figure 26 administrative deans and principals.
Okay.
And the question is, how is that good for the scholars?
Gotcha. So there's two things. I want to correct a nuance there. So the elimination of 34 teachers is not accurate. The elimination of potential titles of teachers is accurate. It won't necessarily eliminate teachers. Those teachers have tenure and they have rights to go back to the classroom and be instructors. As far as administrators go, those deans will actually be supporting some of the things that our community has been talking about for some time. For example, even this parent here is speaking about the bullying issue, the challenge with behavior, incidents with classroom management. We needed some help with managing that element. I couldn't go into another school year thinking that our kids are being bullied, that our kids do not feel safe, that our teachers do not feel safe and don't have anyone to go to when they have trauma or troubling situations with kids. I think you and I would both agree that we needed some support there, and I think at one point we did that. So hence, we came forward with that position. The other position is about academics. It's the Dean of Academics, and we're thinking about how do we improve instruction. And the best way to improve instruction is to bolster up the leadership team with someone who's an expert in that field. So the idea that we're eliminating positions is not accurate. The idea of eliminating titles, which would create some changes within the school staffing, is more accurate. Will that result potentially, where the bumping rules happen in the bargaining agreement, will that result potentially in some teachers leaving? Absolutely. But I don't think the number's 34. I don't know what the number is.
Well, yeah, but it will, you're not increasing the number of teachers teaching students, correct?
I don't know if I can say yes or no at this point.
That's my point, yeah. So there will be 34 less teachers in the school district next year because they will not be, because you're not increasing the number of teachers teaching the students in the classroom. In other words, it's not going to reduce class size.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It won't reduce class size in the end.
Well, again, that wasn't the goal, right?
Okay.
The goal wasn't to reduce class size. The goal is to obviously improve instruction in our schools. And reducing 34 teachers is not accurate, again, just to be clear. Reducing the titles of position is clear. Those teachers that have rights in a position within the school will be bumped into those positions. And you and I can talk about that a little bit, because we've talked about that a couple times.
Last guy who spoke, yes.
Okay, you just said that the goal is to improve the teaching and the education for the students. Of course, that's the goal for all of us. But how are you going to do that when now we have no supports for those students who are struggling the most?
Why don't we have any support?
Because you've eliminated the supports for the teachers and the students by virtue of the Title I supports that's what we did.
Yeah, so again, I eliminated the positions, not necessarily.
So where would the supports come from?
From the teachers that are in the classroom. Again, eliminating titles, not people.
So classroom teacher A has first grade and has 6 kids that don't know the letters of the alphabet,
Sure.
but need to go on to second grade. So she's already, I mean, in a regular classroom, we already have 5 or 6 different levels. And having that Title I support helped pull those little kids out and gave them the small group instruction and working on the standards that they need worked on.
Sure.
So now you've taken that person away.
Taking away the title, not the people.
You took away the person.
Took away the title, not the people. Took away the title.
So where would the support for the teacher be? The
Took away
additional
the title.
support for the student?
Not the people. Yes, that's what
I can my own scenario to this. My son is special ed student. He went from self-contained unit all the way up to 8th grade, hit high school, went into co-teaching, 20 of the kids regular ed, 10 of the kids special ed. He never had a problem with math until we hit high school. Refused to go to, he just turned away school altogether. So I went to his, is it coach? Case manager. I pulled him from one class where he was getting credit to no credit. Title I teacher took him on board during that time frame. So he's gone from a 23% in geometry to an 84%, if I'm not mistaken, just in this grading period. So when she makes a comment about Title I, if I didn't have that Title I teacher involved to help my son, who's going to take the place of that Title I teacher? Because the problem that we're having is you got 20 regular ed kids and then you got 10 special ed, but they don't get that extra individual teaching that they may need in class.
I understand. I understand. So again, title on position, I mean, not the people. We're going to figure out the structure in which we can actually support our kids to a different level. So if you're in this situation, the supports that are needed, we'll find a way to get your supports for your kids. But again, the title of positions are going away, not the people.
Did they take the special ed teacher out of the classroom when we had inclusion? Because I was a special ed teacher, and we went into the classroom with the teacher. Then during some time, I would take the kids out of the classroom.
They're doing it, but it's not enough for some. Some teachers teach a certain way that a kid don't understand it. So even though she's qualified in special ed, she wasn't reaching my kid. So another teacher jumped on board to say, hey, let me have a swing at it. And the light bulb came on. Now he's up on front of the board doing the work. He has that confidence. We're going through testing right now, and he's like, I gotta go home and take a sleeping pill so I can get up and go test for this end of the course exam test that he's never did. He does.
You're saying the special ed teacher didn't take him out and put him into a room to go.
She would take him out. We went through that. This is something that we just changed. It's a year-long course, and he was still struggling all year long. We just changed this last past grading period, and he went from an F to a B. So you can take him out all day, but sometimes some kids don't get it for certain teachers.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Which I think,
what the teachers are saying. I know what our issue is. I'm going through that now with one of them.
And so what I hear, which is great feedback, what I hear is you want to make sure the supports are there for our kids
right.
who need it the most.
Right.
Got it. Got it.
Same with the speech therapist. My son, he has to have speech therapy at least twice a week to learn how to talk. They're there maybe one time during the week, and not 2 or 3 times, trying to help these kids. And there's only 2 students in his class.
Yeah. So, I hear that, and that is slightly nuanced difference, and I think that's a lot of IEPs and what we need to do to make sure that we're meeting the agreements and necessary supports for our kids with IEPs. And that is a question that will have to lead to our director of special ed, but I appreciate that. And our chief schools officer who is here is ultimately the direct supervisor of that person.
I have another question for you. Since when does the teacher decide whether your child goes to another grade because they don't pass the proficiency? What does the grades mean through the whole year? This child is an average student, okay? There's no reason for her not to go. She has an IEP. The IEP should be addressed.
Right, and I think you're raising a point that, thank you. I think you're raising a point that has come up a couple different
But
ways.
the teachers are saying that. Right. That's the whole issue of why I'm saying that I wanted to speak with that teacher.
Gotcha. So
I'm not getting that.
I understand. So I think thank you. I think there are a couple things that are in that. One, about promotion, which I think is a question that has come up multiple times. It happens every year. So that conversation was brought to my desk just recently, so I appreciate that. I want to say in the last couple of days. Given what we've done in the past and given where we're going in the future, I think we have to really think about what we're going to do this year so that we're addressing those pieces. Some folks are in the camp of, like, regardless of where a young person is, we need to push them on. Others are very much against social promotion, right? I think it's a hot button topic.
One
And I
other
think,
thing.
can I finish just 1 second? The challenge with that is we have to do something that we can standardize and believe in, and so that the school leaders have direction. And that's, I think, the most important thing, so we can figure out how we can move forward. And that's what we'll plan to do. In the situation when you're speaking to the decision made by the teacher or decision made by the school leader, there's actually a bigger policy that governs their ability to make those decisions. And that's what we're doing.
Got lower in like, her issue is math, okay? She did the practice proficiency, she got a 15%. Okay, we just put in her IEP, which should have been in there a long time ago, okay, that she was struggling in math. Okay, but the teachers should be encouraging that child because that child got that 15%, encouraging her to do better and learn more, you know.
Absolutely.
But the teacher's saying, well, you're not going to pass and go into 5th grade because you didn't, you're not passing, you can't pass the proficiency test.
I remember Skylar coming on and saying that.
That's the issue.
Word
we
for
have.
word.
I understand, and I apologize on behalf of the district for that being Skylar's experience, and obviously.
But I've got a
with
child now
with
that's saying that I'm not going to be able to pass because I can't pass this test.
I understand, I hear what you're
Just
saying.
the that's because of what the teacher is.
Her self-esteem has went from good to poor now. It's like the other kids are saying, well, I don't want to go to school anymore.
Okay, so let's do this, because I want to, there's a bunch of other folks that want to jump in here, and I want to hear them as well. But what I hear, there's a challenge with the teacher, and I understand that we need to address this for Skylar, we need to address this for kids that may be in that class.
Okay, that's just fine.
Absolutely. So let's do this, because I want to make sure I hear the other voices. Dr. Brown is here, you and I will sit and get this, figure out a plan to address this for Skylar, but more importantly with that teacher. And again, I don't want everyone else in the room to think this is all of our teachers. We have wonderful teachers throughout the district. Right, and so I think, and I'm sure this teacher is great too. We have to figure out how to find that greatness and match it with Skylar.
Can't get that greatness if they don't talk to you.
So we'll talk afterwards. And I promise we'll talk right. Yes, ma'am.
Different subject.
Yes.
One of your slides showed designing pre-K.
Yes.
Can you give us at a high level what, I know decisions are being made, but can you tell us what has been decided so far?
Yes, so at this point we have decided, obviously, ECE director, that was the first big step. The second is we are finalizing the partner that is going to be working with us to do that work. They'll actually be here, I believe, next week. And I want to make sure the contract is signed before I can actually speak to it. I believe I signed it, so I think we might be okay, but I'm not sure, so I won't mention the name of the group that was selected. They're going to be here to do the initial, diagnostic work, see where we are, see where we need to go, convening those that are part of that pre-K, continuum across the city, and getting those partners at the table. Realizing, though, that is just a piece of early childhood as well. So pre-K is a big piece, and we understand that, but they're also going to be building out that larger instructional vision over time. So they got to get here on the ground, start with pre-K, and then move up 1 and 2. In the interim, though, we have already started registration for our young people. If you haven't already, pass the word that, yes, I see nods from principals. We're seeing people start to trickle in, the registration start. So nonetheless, we've started registration for our pre-K babies at all of our 10 elementary schools.
And how many slots are we looking at for pre-K?
I knew you were going to ask me that. And that was a question I don't have the answer to off the top of my head. And I was trying to think. I don't know if you saw the wheels in my head turning. I knew she was going to ask me the questions. I do not know off the top of my head, but I can find out.
Okay. And I just publicly want to thank you for opening those meetings, those task force meetings, because it's good to be a part of those.
Great.
And to be included and, as we administer Head Start, and as an existing partner, we see the potential, and it's great. The way the process is working is very inclusive, so that is appreciated.
Great, thank you, we appreciate it. Yes.
Who will be your teachers for the preschool program?
The current teachers that are.
Lorain City School teachers?
Yes.
All right, let me recap what you said. Okay, each building will have a turnaround principal.
Yes, ma'am.
Each building will have a dean of academics.
Yes, ma'am.
And each building will have a dean of scholars and parents. So, how I see it is to walk in a school with this powerful resources, these 3 people in place would give that turnaround principal more time to get in their classroom for instructional learning, okay? Because the dean of academics will also they will serve as student gathering, get together to figure all this out. And dean of student scholars and family will be able to handle that community, hooking it up to the school. So even though many think that you are cutting 34 people, as I am hearing, but what I hear is the school's gonna have more resources in them than I have ever known for a long time. The other part of this, Mr. Arctic, is with the inclusion program. Teachers, they call them intervention specialists. They go in the classroom with the max of 1 hour. Is there any way you can increase that time for those babies to get served in these inclusion classrooms?
I don't want to say yes or no without actually having a conversation with our director of student services.
Okay.
It may be part of that next iteration of her plans on how we need to address our kids that need the most. But I don't want to speak for her without her actually being here to be able to speak to it on her behalf. The reason why, I think it's very easy to say yes or no without actually having a plan behind it. So I don't want to say yes and say here's the plan, and I don't want to say no and here's why not. So I think it is possible, but I would want to have more information before I can answer that. But to your initial comment around the leadership team, I think you are highlighting something that I know was a pain point for our school leaders, where, I mean, one after the other, when I had meetings with them, up to 2 hours in the cafeteria or other time away from supporting teachers and teaching and learning. And so the leadership team being able to spread that across, and especially our Dean of Scholar and Family Engagement, having a bigger hand in that process will allow us to focus more intently on helping our teachers and helping our kids reach their academic goals.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You talked about the kids on the lower end of the spectrum. What about the kids on that upper end of the spectrum?
And I feel like in August, I told you to remind me to ask that question at a meeting at Harrison. Did you ask me that question at Harrison?
I think I did.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I think two of the things we're looking to push that are different than we've done in the past. Part of it's built into that high school model. So when we think about our kids, and again, I'll get to the elementary in the middle in a second. When we think about our high school model, I think we need to ramp up the rigor of instruction there. As many of you know, we have 0 AP courses in our high school currently. 0. I don't know if there's many high schools in the country that can say they have 0. The good news is we will have 4 next year. So progress, not where we want to be, but at least progress. Nick, can you rattle off the 4?
Yeah, it'll be statistics, a math course. It'll be English, language composition, of environmental science, and a U.S. government. And then the following year, the second year, we are in talks with Cleveland State for computer science. So we'll have 5 within 2 years.
So that's one of the bigger shifts for our higher performing kids. As you also know, Early College Academy is expanding, so we're going to have more of our scholars going into that program over time, which also ramps up the rigor in high school. In elementary and middle, I think you're asking a very good question around how we better support our kids earlier. I don't have a great answer for that other than we need to improve the rigor of instruction in our daily classrooms now. If you remember back to the TNTP audit that showed the rigor of instruction that was happening across the district and how much was aligned to state standards. I think the number was about 17% of our instruction was aligned to state standard or above, right? So there's a lot of work to be done there, and I want to shore up that base. And that report is on the Lorraine Promise page, but I think it was 17%.
It was.
It was 17%.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Sir, how are you?
Good. I want to know if you had any fine art program.
Yes, so fine arts, it is mixed in our Arts and Media Academy for the high school side. That unfortunately doesn't start for another year, but we will have that. In addition though, we just met with Oberlin College about some of the art programs they're offering as well. Their target is mostly middle school age. But nonetheless, that is some of the work that is happening for our middle school kids, and we're trying to figure out ways to expand that. To answer your question, Yes, but maybe not quite yet, because it takes a little bit of time to build those programs.
I mean, there's not gonna be any music?
No, there's music.
Theory? Well, he says there's no music classes at all. That's not music, no, he's talking about music theory.
There's
Those
music
type
history.
things, to learn how to read and know
Understand.
the history of music.
Yeah, that's going to come out of the Arts and Media Academy, unfortunately, but it's going to take a year for it to be built. But yes, it's coming. It's coming. Sir,
How are you?
Oh, what? How are you?
That was good news about academics. Now, can you tell me again, it means that the high end is going up, there's 4 areas that we're going to score higher than what we did, right?
Well, hopefully. What it actually is promoting is that we'll have more rigorous courses for our kids. So we're raising the bar for our kids over time. Just realizing that we need to do more and give them better opportunities. Yes.
Good news.
Thank you. Yes.
Back to the fine arts, will there be anything for the lower elementaries?
Yeah, so that conversation also came out to figure out how we can provide more. I don't have a great answer right now because we have to figure out how to build it out. Part of the 3 C's is at least exposure to some of those pieces. I think that was our first step. The second step is to figure out how can we then potentially build it into curriculum as we move forward, which is the bigger question. I remember a fifth grade teacher at Admiral King asked me that very question around how do we get more of this earlier. So we're still trying to figure it out. We literally had a meeting Monday of this week to talk about some of the fine arts and opportunities. So I don't have an answer yet, but they're building models to see what we can do. Yes, I know he had a question as well. I want to not miss it as well.
I don't have children in the school district, so help me when you say you don't have, or you have limited fine arts. What does that mean?
Yeah, and I want to make sure I heard Pablo correctly when he was asking about this. In high school, we have I would say a fair number of opportunities, extracurricular activities. However, as you get closer to kindergarten, they lessen. Right? And one of the big goals is to figure out how to provide more opportunities for our kids earlier so they can fall in love with the fine arts and they can fall in love with these pieces. But we don't have those programs to the extent that we have in high school. We have some dabbles. So we have some dabbles of like traditional art classes and music, but not the music theory, not more in-depth experiences.
I started at Lorain School as a music teacher, so I'm glad you still have that.
Yes, and I believe you can also sing. So at the end, you're going to sing. And it's true because I've heard her sing before.
Back to the turnaround principles, just quickly. Last week, before you had the Saturday interviews, the nursepaper had asked you if we could the finalists.
Yeah.
All right, and you had cited that you couldn't give finalist names because you had their employers, current employers, didn't know about that.
Sure.
And we were curious how they could become a finalist without knowing what they've been doing in their last job if you haven't contacted their previous employer.
Sure. So there's 2 things that are in that. One of which, there are candidates that are going out on a limb in trying to trust Lorain. And unfortunately, the narrative that they read in the newspaper probably gives them mixed reviews on whether or not they want to fully commit and make themselves known to their former past principal and say, I want to be a part of this, because that's risky. I mean, if you read our headlines and read our papers and the mixture of communication, I probably wouldn't tell my boss either. Right? And I'll be very cautious. So we respect that in a candidate because we want to protect their identity and make sure as a person they're cared for first. Because, say for example, they're not selected as a principal, then where do they go? Their principal, they've been outed by the paper, they've been outed by the Lorain community, and they've been left hung to dry. So I didn't want that to happen to them. And so more importantly was for, hey, go through the interview process. Then we do our reference check from there. The second piece is we check resumes, obviously. We do phone screens. And the fact that we haven't communicated to their current employer, like their principal or whoever it might have been, is really a moot point in the sense that that information happens once we say, you know what, this is the person we want. If it's a person we're thinking about, we don't need to have that interaction yet because it's not completely serious. For example, when I was interviewing, gosh, even for my CAO job in St. Louis, I asked for that anonymity because I was taking huge risks potentially moving a 2-year-old boy and a beautiful wife to the Midwest. And I didn't want to take that risk without knowing some assurances first. And they respected that. And so I felt I could only do the same for those individuals.
When you were a finalist, did they actually talk I mean, these were finalists, these weren't just applicants, these were the finalists for the Tournament Principal job.
My former employer wasn't contacted until I said I was definitely leaving, and they definitely wanted me.
That's right.
We as parents, grandparents, and they still have children and grandchildren in school, what can we do to help the school and help you and help the teachers to better the program?
I love that question. Thank you.
Amen.
There are a few things. Keep coming here. keep being that person that always asks us the tough questions like everyone else is asking us, because that's the only way we get better with tough questions. Two, there are a few avenues. So there's our CBS meetings where community, business, and school partners come together to grapple with some of these challenges. One, as you're speaking to like how to get, maybe even grandmothers and others involved. There's mentoring that we're trying to get. Maybe you could be a part of that. And then back to the grandmother and mother behind you. When we're building out Parent University, we need voices like you to help us. What are grandparents? What do they need? What do parents need to be successful for their young people? So those, I think, are a couple of things.
Thank you, I appreciate it, because one thing that I have to say, and maybe it's, we don't have prayer in the school no more. So if we had grandparents that do pray and get around, so maybe that would help them. And then people like this young lady back here, maybe other parents can talk to these parents, and maybe we can come up with a solution to try to help each other out. And
I love that, because I think there's an ability.
What about the students?
well, we got to talk to each other so that we can help each other too. Right, that's what I said, but you and I can talk if we got children, and maybe I can give you some ideas to help you, and then you get your child, and we get the others that's out there.
I think
if we don't communicate, then we can't get it done.
And I think what's powerful about this moment is that there's a lot of knowledge between two individuals, and sometimes just a conversation brings us to a deeper understanding. And I think that opportunity, I can act, you know what, you don't even have to call me, right? Because you're going to talk to her and you're going to figure it all out, right? I tried. But no, in all seriousness. Right. And I in jest, I apologize, in jest, I bring it up. But I think the point is, there's power. Right, there's power in connecting people around the challenge. Completely agree. Yes, ma'am. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We were on our way to karate. They wanted to come to this meeting and hear what was going on.
All right.
So this is why they're in the uniform. We were on our way to grab them, turned around and came back. And I couldn't get in the building. We didn't know where to go. But
well, you gotta kick through that window.
that's what he said. Ron, you want me to knock the door down? I have two questions. We were late, obviously, but itinerants. Will there be 5? Going back to where it was before, so our scheduling can be consistent, like I want my own librarian, I want my own music teacher, I want my own art teacher, I want my own gym teacher, I want my own, I'm sorry I'm being stingy, and I'm building a computer, because when they shift around like that, schedules, different times, if we could have our own, we could get more help, And number 2, when she said about parents, we went on a field trip, and I'm very close with all my parents.
Yep.
Every single one. I go to their house, they have my personal cell phone, they know. And a lot of them say, well, I can't come because they can't pass a background check.
That came up a little bit earlier.
Right, but I wasn't here.
I understand.
Is there any, like a one pass, as long as it's not pedophile? I mean, they're just going on one trip. Like, if it's not like a deep felony, if it's a misdemeanor.
I understand, but I have to say my heart was here and then it fell. Yeah, really nervous. In all seriousness though, I would never, ever want to put a young person's life in any type of harm without the greatest precaution. Right? And so I would have to say absolutely I cannot do the one pass off. I mean, honestly, it could be a great person, but it could also.
So that means they shouldn't be at our field days either.
Right. Wow.
And then you can't do a background check when we're having field day outside. We have parent volunteers. They come just going to help the one time for the field day. So they're not even allowed on field day. They're not even allowed on. Correct?
So just to answer the question back to the field trip piece of it all, you can't have the one pass. But to go to your other question, which I now lost because my heart fell to the floor. That was the first question.
Itinerant. Can we have our own
I would absolutely love to have a whole cadre at every single school. However, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a however. The however is, so does everybody else. And the challenge is, I also hear the need for additional support for our most performing kids. I hear all the itineraries are kind of like extra courses that are necessary. I hear the need for more teachers. So all of those pieces I would love to do, but the pie is still only so big, and we have to cut it up in so many different ways. And the biggest things that have become a priority, from my understanding, it sounds like obviously individual scholar support at, obviously who are struggling or academically, and then also has come up many times around scholar behavior in classroom management. So that's where I put most of that time, right? However, it does not mean I'm cutting all of the other pieces. It's just that I can't fulfill all
Well,
of
no,
it.
I know you're not cutting because it's not there. My kids didn't get library this year.
Right.
So they would, they didn't get it, but the upper grades got it. We didn't get library. I have 2 computers, some have 2 gym,
I wish there was a better answer for many reasons. I think one, the other challenge that is still looming is the fact that if the levy isn't passed, there's $3.1 million that I'll also have to figure out how to fill that gap with. So I wish I could fulfill that, but I also know the forecast may be something.
So that means we're sharing like we are 2 days here, nothing here.
2 questions.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment for the parent volunteer thing. According to the Ohio Department of Education, I believe it's their Ohio Revised Code, a parent does not have to have, when she's talking about field day and everything, they don't have to have a background check if they are not being left alone with a child. If the teacher is there all the time.
Perfect. So you get it better. Thank you.
I have something else to just as a positive.
Yeah.
We have problems getting help with being supervised on field trips. And a lot of it is because we have young parents that also have another young child that can't bring them along. So I contacted Steve Sturgill and I said, why don't we have our older scholars with our little scholars? So we had 9 high school kids come with us to kindergarten, and they were phenomenal. And I didn't even have to direct them. I said, just corral them. They're like, kids, you got to keep on putting it back in the basket. And they helped through the whole day. And we also have like older males there that, usually it's women that go on field trips, we stand by a male gap, which always has a concern for me. So there's ways that we can get the help. And with me and Shelley we'll talk about next year, at the beginning of the year, having some of those older scholars come over and work with our little ones.
I love that. And that has come up a couple different ways. First of all, the fact that, thank you for that positive good news, that piece. I think there's a couple things that come out of that, one of which we have the resources right in this room. That's why this dialogue is so important, right? 2, I think it's awesome too that we can get our younger kids, and we've been talking about that for some time around how do we get our older kids to our younger kids, right? And doing it more frequently. And 3, how about those role models for our kindergarten babies, right? For them to aspire and to look up to. So I appreciate hearing that, and that's good feedback for us to figure out how can we do more of it. All right. I'm trying to go to hands that I haven't heard from first. So I'm going to go here, and then I heard from you once, and then
Okay, back to the background check. Okay, so there's no passes for the field trips and all that, but what if you're a parent on PTO? Are they going to have to be fingerprinted and background checked? Because they do a lot with the children.
I'm sorry, say it.
Would the PTO have to be background checked and fingerprinted because they do stuff with the children and for the children? They have contact with those children.
Yeah. This is helpful, honestly, because this is the first time I've heard this issue kind of come up. So we'll figure out a statement and post it out because all of these have nuances and we need to find answers. I don't want to tell you the wrong answer here because it is a legitimate concern that we need to fix. Because it sounds like, one, you want to be a part of this. You want to, or you or someone else who's in the
I am very involved in my children's lives, and I think if you have to be fingerprinted to go on a field trip with these babies, then you should also have to do it for PTO or anything else that you have to walk into those doors in that school.
I understand.
We do. We do. We do. Anything that we participate in and we have to come into the school, they have to be fingerprinted for. Even the volunteers across the board. Everybody has to be.
I wanted everyone to know that the levy renewal is not going to cost Lorain City 1 penny. Don't let anybody fool you about that. It's a renewal. And I don't care what you read in the paper, it's a renewal. Your house won't go up 1 penny. Now, we do need another levy, and we're going to do everything that we can. And I want you all to help us that you make sure that the board does not stumble and not put the renewal on the ballot.
Come on, Pete.
Can you say that again?
Please say that again.
Stand up and say it.
That's right.
The renewal will not cost you or anybody in the city of Lorain 1 penny. It's a renewal. Now, the actual levy needs to be put on the ballot.
Who has the right to do that?
The Board of Education.
Okay.
The board and you, the board members.
Right.
And you need to make sure that none of the board members stumble and not put it on in the right timeline so that you can vote on it.
Right.
That is all the information you need about that.
With that said, I think that's actually a good space to close. So if you have individual questions, I will take them now when we close out. But I want to thank you for your questions and comments. There will be folks around here to answer a few questions before we leave. But I think more than any other town hall, this has probably been the most interactive. I think that is really powerful for our community. Go back to the Cowboys versus the pit crew. As you can see, like there's no one cowboy that can stand up here and give you all the answers. Definitely not possible. But it's the pit crew that gets the better solution. So I thank you and thank you for coming tonight.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.